is made with a plunge cut into the tree and not starting at the back of the tree and cutting towards the hinge. And that's the biggest safety improvement in the modern felling technique over the old felling technique. The reason for that is, you make a plunge cut, and you may have all been taught in chainsaw classes that plunge cuts are dangerous because you can get kickback. But there are safe ways to do plunge cuts, and the danger of kickback can be reduced to almost zero, and you're improving the safety of the tree felling by such a monumental amount that it's worth it to do the plunge cuts and to learn how to safely do a plunge cut, even though they're a little scary at first if you've just picked up a chainsaw or you haven't used one very much. So you plunge cut in, you get the hinge made, and then you cut back and leave a little bit attached at the back of the tree. So now you have your hinge attached, and you have your notch made, and you have a big open spot, and you have a little bit of wood at the back of the tree that's still attached. It's like a three-legged stool. You've got the hinge and a piece of wood back here. The tree is still stable at that point. You can go away and eat lunch, and the tree will still be standing when you get back. You don't have to worry about it. It's completely safe. And yet, it takes about 2 seconds, maybe only 1 second of cutting on that back piece of wood, and the tree will go where you want it to go. So you're keeping it completely safe until the very last second. The old way, where you start from the back of the tree and cut in slowly and you cut towards your hinge, what you're doing is you're making your tree more and more and more unstable, and at some point the tree is going to start to fall while you're still cutting, and you have to make a decision. Have I cut enough now to walk away, and the tree is already moving, and you're still cutting with the saw at the base of the tree, which is the most dangerous place to be when the tree is falling? This technique allows you to have the tree totally standing, totally secure. You take that 1 second and make the last cut, and you can have your saw shut off, and you can be 15 feet away before the tree is even halfway to the ground. Describing trees in a woodlot, they always talk about DBH, diameter breast height. And that's the diameter of the tree right about here at 4 or 5 feet high. So on this tree, I'm looking at it and I'm saying that tree is about 7 inches DBH. 7 inches is the measurement that we've got in our head that everything else will be based on. So I'm going to make a face cut first. That's going to be on in the direction where the tree is falling. So if I want the tree to fall down there, my face cut is going to be in that direction. So it'll be on this side of the tree over here. So you're basically creating a notch. And that notch, as the tree falls, is going to close up. So I'm making a notch on the face of the tree. And that notch, I want it to be 70 degrees to 90 degrees. So this is about 70, this is 90. I want a big, open notch. Big in terms of degrees, not in terms of depth. This is only the degree of the opening. So 70 to 90 degrees. No, 70 to 90 degrees. Now you're creating a hinge that tree is going to fall on. So that's the idea, is that you're making like a hinge at the bottom of the tree, which will direct it. Just like your door hinges direct where your door opens, we're going to put a hinge on the bottom of this tree that makes it go exactly where we want it to go. So the width of that hinge, we want to be 80% DBH. Okay? 80% DBH. If this was a 10-inch tree, that means I want an 8-inch wide hinge. That is what determines how deeply I cut into the tree. To get 8 inches, I mean, if any of you are like a math genius, I am not. You would probably be able to do this in your head. But if you imagine a circle, and you've got a diameter, and you want to get 80% of the diameter, you only have to go in maybe a fifth to a quarter of the way into that circle to get 80% of the diameter. Okay? 80% of diameter. If you're not following, you'll get a visual in just a moment, so you'll be able to see what I'm talking through. It's a lot of numbers, and I know it's hard. When I first got this, it kind of overwhelmed me a little bit. So 80% is your hinge width, and then your hinge thickness, you want to be 10% DBH. So in this case, it's a 7-inch tree. I want it to be 0.7 inches, or roughly 3/4 of an inch, my hinge thickness. And that's determined by my back cut, which I'll talk about in a second. So those are the numbers that you have to remember, or have them written down and work through them. But those are the numbers that you use to make your plan for felling this tree. So I'm making a face cut as my first step. That face cut will determine the width of my hinge and the angle. I get the first two things in my face cut. Then I will go to make the back cut. One of the biggest. So for years and years and years, all the safety manuals said no plunge cuts. Just don't do plunge cuts. They're too dangerous. Don't do them. But you can do a plunge cut safely. If I want to plunge right in here, which I do, okay, I'm not going to go straight in because I would have that kickback problem. I'm going to start here, and now, even though I'm cutting with the tip, it can't kick anywhere except for into the tree. So the tree itself is preventing the kickback. And I can go in until I'm in, not quite to where I want my hinge to be, because I don't want to try to be so super accurate that I'm cutting my hinge and doing my plunge cut at the same time. I want to be focusing on a clean plunge cut, and then I can cut forward and make my hinge that 3/4 inch that I want it to be. So I'm going to cut in, plunge across, make my hinge the way I want it to be, and then cut back and leave a good chunk of wood established there. And then I'm going to shut my chainsaw off, and the tree will stay there. I can put my wedge in and drive a wedge so that it's ready. It's already wedging the tree before the wedge even needs to be there. And that way when I cut my back piece, if the tree wanted to go backwards on me, I already have a wedge in there. It won't be able to go back and pinch my saw. And it won't be able to get that back lean at all. So I've established where, my control over that tree right from that point on it. Plunge cut, the tree is still totally stable. It's not going to fall. Get my wedge out. Drive it. Now if I've misinterpreted the lean and it was actually leaning back that way, it still can't go that way. I've taken care of that problem if that problem exists. Now all I've got to do is cut that back latch. If it's leaning the way I think it's leaning, it's just going to go. If it's not, I can shut my saw off, tap my wedge a little bit, and the tree will go right where I want it to go. So I'm going to cut that latch, and it should just go. If it doesn't, I can shut the saw off, tap it, and it'll go right down. I'm also going to move my axe out of my escape lane here so I don't trip over my axe when I'm leaving the scene of the... Tree's going, saw's off, I'm 15 feet away, and now it's on the ground. Totally safe. You're not doing that the old-fashioned way would have been to start the cut from the back, and as I'm cutting, the tree starts falling, and I have to make a decision while the tree is falling, while my saw is running, about when to leave the scene. Much, much more dangerous than this way. This gives me control right up to the last second, and I can be away from the scene, and the tree goes down.
Is there a reason you
Perfect hinge on this thing. So you can actually see the way it worked. This is back up here like this. Here's my face cut. I did my plunge cut in here, and then I cut forward to make about a 3/4 inch wide hinge. I cut back, and I left a good chunk, like at least an inch of wood back there. So a nice little piece in the back.
And you always come in lower under the
and
plunge.
You don't have to come in lower, but I didn't want to hit my wedge. And there's no reason, so when I made this back cut, they're asking why this one here is lower than this one. And the only reason for that is that I had my wedge right here. And I could have come in at the same level, and I would have had the same result, only I probably would have nicked my wedge.